Hello, welcome back to my series in Factorio, in which I'm attempting to build my very first mega factory. My name is Azrael. Come along with me as we continue our adventure. For those of you who may not be aware, in the last double feature episode, I completely tore down the heart of the factory so that I may rebuild it better. It was about time to do that. It was it wasn't the kind of thing that I could keep expanding in its previous form. So we just tore the whole thing down, and my giant mass of temporary stuff down there. Anyway, we got our belt production facility up and running, and right now I'm just working to augment the iron plate input, doing some slight modifications to this whole area. I'm gonna increase the flow up here. I'm gonna put in a belt balancer up here, a 4-lane belt balancer. You've seen me do this in a couple other places. It seems to work fairly well, so we're not going to try to reinvent the wheel there. I'm going to put up another line of another dual column of electric furnaces to take in the iron ore and smelt it. That should do it. Yes. And I set up this area a little bit differently, or a little bit wrong, I should say, so I went ahead and fixed that. And now time to bring in the line from my drop-off area. There it goes. And then finally put in some power so that everything can actually work. And look at that. It's working just fine. And eventually I'll get some beacons and some modules over there to increase production a little bit further. Another thing I wanted to do is fix this little issue that I had in my blue circuit production, where it just wasn't, the belts were in the wrong order and just not feeding the system very well. So I'm going to reverse the belts here. I'm going to put the red circuits on the outside and the green circuits on the inside. That way the inside inserters that are taking the green circuits can pick up more of them at a time and not bottleneck the system there. Even though blue circuits do take a fairly long time to craft, this way at least it's not slowing down because of input. So that should work out just fine there. And I also wanted to add in an extra assembler up here to feed gears into the underground belt assembler, because that thing, it requires 40 gears. You can see it's just slowly crawling up there. I have 5 different gear machines feeding that assembler, and it's still just not quite fast enough. But it's better than it was before, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. It's one of those things that you just leave it alone for a while, it'll do its thing and eventually fill up with all of the underground belts you could need. And I'm going to go and pick up a few more things down here. Also stocking up on some ammunition, because I'm going to be going out and clearing some biter bases here in a little bit in order to make room to expand this factory. Because when you're dealing with a mega factory, as I have learned, it's just a matter of clearing out as much area as you possibly can. I also realized that my blueprint for this main bus design somehow ended up in one of those overflow chests. So I'm going to go ahead and I had to pull that out and in order to use it again. And I finally have enough stone bricks left over in my inventory from when I crafted those electric furnaces, so that I can finish up the stone brick path here. Eventually I would like to get something crafting up some concrete as well, but for now this will be just fine. Clearing up some area, because the next rack that I'm going to design is going to be the inserter rack, because that is going to be another thing that needs to be up and running at some point before I can really build up the remaining areas of the factory. After this, of course, I'm planning on building up a military facility and a science facility. should be the four main areas of the factory, the other two being the circuits and the miscellaneous that I'm currently working on. And then as the future progresses, we'll see what else the factory will require. For right now, there's just I'm trying to get rid of the excess copper plates in my inventory because they are taking up a tremendous amount of space, and I want them fed into the copper bus, but not over on the master bus area because right now nothing in the miscellaneous factory is actually using copper. The only place that's using copper and using a substantial amount of it is the circuit facility. So I want to make sure that it's going to be feeding in there. And of course some of that will eventually feed into the master bus once that takes off. So it'll all hopefully balance out and be cool and yeah, everything that we need. I'm going to try to take as many inserters out of here that have already been crafted up as I possibly can, because I don't need this inserter rack to be crafting up a whole bunch of inserters that I already have. But it will be put up in place. Right now I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do this. I've got some ideas, and those the stack inserters are like the only inserter that actually requires red circuits. So that's just kind of throwing a wrench into my plans here. But it shouldn't be too difficult to deal with. Right now I'm just laying it out. I'm going to have the iron plates coming up on the left, right here. And then both types of circuits will be trailing up the middle. And yeah, just playing around with a few different layouts here. Nothing new, of course. You've seen me do this a lot, so it's just a matter of figuring it all out and getting it to work. I'm going to put in some buffer chests like I had before, and then go ahead and fill them preemptively with the items that I already have in my inventory. Yeah, the everything up to the filter inserter is going to be handled over here on the left side. And then I'm going to put the stack inserters and stack filter inserters over on the right hand side. The only issue with that is that the stack inserter does require the fast inserters, so those sort of have to be traded across the way at some point. I briefly considered just having a second line of inserter factories along the right hand side to produce the fast inserters, but I figured that that's a bit of a waste. I've already got that happening over on the left, so why bother doubling up on that? But in the meantime, I'm going to start getting my my resources input from the main bus down here, starting with the iron plates. Yeah, just trying to just reminding myself of how all this works. It's been a while. I've had a busy week, so this wasn't the Factorio was not exactly a priority on my mind. So my brain has sort of let go of all the information it didn't deem to be important at the moment. So in the meantime, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how everything's going to continue feeding up here. And yeah, so gonna get some not circuits, the gears rather, up from that inserter, and do a little bit of finagling with those belts. Nothing too serious. It all goes where it needs to go in the end. And then I'm 2 belts shy of finishing that, so I'll just pick up like 200. That ought to do it. Besides, I've still got more to do down here anyway. Alright, there is the electronic circuits. And now the advanced circuits, I'll have them feed out a little bit farther along the way, just like that. And that should feed it in, so everything should be ready to go. I just need to power it all up now. I'm just figuring out how to get it all working. And there it goes. We'll check back in on that a little bit later just to see how everything's going. Right now I'm going to try to continue picking up as many of the inserters out of here that I already have, now that I have more room in my inventory. Also picking up some laser turrets and gun turrets, and so my inventory fills up for a second time. And I don't actually have enough room in those output boxes, so I'm going to upgrade a few of them to steel chests, so that yes, they can fit more, but then of course locking them off so that they don't produce that many. I really don't need that many, I just needed a place to put the overflow. So everything there looks like it's going well enough. Now, in the meantime, another thing I wanted to do, I wanted to go ahead and take the fight out to the biters once more, and also pick up some wall segments and other various bits here so that I can be well prepared for what lies ahead. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out where everything is in all of my my overflow boxes. Pick up a few lights as well, because I'm going to be needing those. Alright, I want to craft up some more poison capsules. I need some more steel. I'll head over here and steal some coal off the train. Craft up a few more of those capsules. Now, in the meantime, I've also noticed that there's no iron ore, or at least what little there is not lasting nearly long enough. I head over here to my iron mine, and absolutely none of it is working. So it's time to rearrange this area. This iron deposit is almost completely empty, and it'll eventually be time to tear the whole thing down and build anew somewhere else. But in the meantime, I'm just going to try to maximize the amount of mining drills that I can put on this patch. Maybe I could have put a few more in there, but it's not that big of a deal. Go ahead and feed that over here into my loading system. Get everything powered up so that it can actually work. Right now the train is stopping, and then since there's no activity, it just takes off once again. But now that issue should be resolved. Yeah, here it is. It is filling up. I don't need this much loading technology, so yeah, since this is just a small amount of ore, I'm just going to have one box feeding in there. And then that's just not quite going fast enough to keep up with those mining drills, so I'll split it and do two. That should easily take care of all that. Put up some lights so you can see what I'm doing. And then finally the finishing up the defenses around here. And while I'm doing that, I get an alarm that tells me that something is being destroyed down in iron mine number 2. I'm going to go ahead and check that out. And yeah, some biters took out one of my turrets. Not a huge deal. They didn't get past the wall, but so that I don't have to constantly come back and manage the ammunition in these, I'm going to augment the defenses around here with a couple of laser turrets. Yeah, oh, those fit in quite nicely there. Get it all powered up. There we go. That seemed to be the strongest point of contention right there along the wall, so I'm just going to reinforce that. Eventually I'll come back through and reinforce the entire thing, but I won't bother with it right now. In the meantime, I'm heading over here to take out some biter nests. I'm going to go ahead and speed things up a little bit because this is all just kind of boring and repetitive, so in the meantime, yeah, just taking out some of the more pressing needs. Use a little bit of fire there. to take out some of those spawners, and then I realized I was shooting fire dangerously close to the edge of a forest. I could have set the whole thing on fire, and that may not have necessarily been a good thing. I got to be a little bit more careful with my flammables. Alright, that takes care of all that. I realize now in hindsight that I left a few of the alien artifacts behind there. I'll eventually find those once again and go back and pick them up. I had a bunch of biters follow me through the forest. The biter AI just doesn't seem to be able to handle the the pathfinding through those areas as well as the player can. So, in the meantime, I'll decide I'll come in from a slightly different angle here, and come in from the north instead, and take out some of these biters as well. I'll throw in a couple of poison capsules, take care of the big selection of worms there, and then just mop up the remains. Awesome. Now, since this can get very repetitive and dull, let's go ahead and talk about a few other things here. Primarily some of the things that I've learned about the plans for the 0.15 experimental release. Right now they are in the 0.14 experimental branch, but I am not using it right now because the 0.14 primarily focuses on multiplayer aspects of the game, and since I don't play the game in multiplayer, it's not that I have a problem with multiplayer, I don't like other people messing with my factory. I set things up the way I want them to be, and if somebody else came in and just started moving stuff around saying, oh, it'd be so much better to do it this way, that would kind of drive me nuts. Real quick, right here, I am over in my oil processing facility setting up some indicator lights to show which circuit conditions are activating the power. Something I can just look at real quick. A couple of lights that'll go on based on the content in those oil storage tanks. Anyway, it accidentally died right there, so we're going to go ahead and take two on that. Anyway, as I was saying, the 0.15 experimental update is just around the corner, and they've talked about some interesting additions there. One of the things that I like the most is that the idea of finally adding a liquid cargo car for the train system, so that you can actually haul crude oil and ideally other types of fluid as well around on your rail network, which will make things so much nicer. The other thing that I've heard of them talking about there is the possible addition of different types of energy production, because right now we only really have two types of energy production in the factory itself, and that being steam generation and solar power production. And I'm not really quite sure how I feel about the idea of a third late game option, such as say fusion or whatever they want to talk about. It can be done well, or it could be done in a really terrible way. I'll explain my thoughts on that. The idea of the current systems we have is that steam power is easy to set up in the early game, and it is sufficient enough for your power consumption for the early stage. And then when you get up to the mid-game, you've hopefully moved on to solar power. The thing that I like about solar power is that it's free and non-polluting. The only drawback to it is how much land it requires for all of the solar panels and the accumulators and whatnot, which is an interesting trade-off, but not like a completely insurmountable one, as you've seen me do several times. I have an enormous solar field. I know that it's by far not the largest one. There's plenty of other players out there with larger solar fields than mine. And of course, by the end of the game, my solar field will have to be made several times larger than it already is. But see, it's not so much of a problem, really, because I like the idea that you have to sacrifice a great deal of space for the convenience of a free and renewable energy source, even if it's an energy source that goes away for half the day and doesn't tell us where it's going. Um, but the idea of a third thing in there is certainly intriguing, especially considering that you have a portable fusion generator in your power armor. So why couldn't you have that out in the real world, right? It just the concept there. I once again died, so take two on this one. Uh, anyway, the idea behind fusion is that I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that, because it might make things too easy in the later game. And just as I've cleared out all this area, my spiders have moved into the area that I just cleared. I'm going to go ahead and take care of some of that. Uh, the idea, though, is that, anyway, going back to the fusion, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but the idea of a fusion generator, or whatever else they might come up with, I don't know, it could be something else. Anyway, that there should be some kind of trade-off to the added convenience of such a system. I mean, perhaps the fusion generation can power your entire factory better than solar can, but there needs to be some kind of raw material trade-off, or a potential danger, maybe. Somebody suggested that maybe the fusion generator is always running at 100% capacity, whether your factory requires it or not, and any excess power that it's producing might cause it to overheat and eventually explode if you're not paying too much attention to it. Which, as long as the explosion doesn't really cause a whole lot of damage to everything else in your factory, that might be an interesting way of handling it, but I'm not really sure I'd want to constantly keep an eye on a ticking time bomb, as it were. So we'll see what kind of plans they come up with for that. But in the meantime, I honestly feel that solar power, as it is good enough for me. Anyway, that is the end of our episode today. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Azrael. Never stop building unless you're killing biters.